help you understand the process a little bit better, so you're not wasting your time and you're not wasting your valuable energy on applying for positions that you don't really qualify for. Okay, so hopefully I'll streamline the process. A couple of other things I want you to keep in mind as we move forward. If you're applying to positions within the United States, you have to be a U.S. citizen. Okay? If you're not a U.S. citizen, we also have positions in the U.S. embassies overseas where you can apply as a locally employed staff. That means you're applying from that country as the host. Oh. Okay, so we were talking about LES positions, locally employed. Can you guys hear me? Good? Better? Better? I'm not used to this. Is my first time doing this. Perfect. I want to make sure that thing doesn't time out. Okay, the other thing I want you to understand is that I don't work in the passport office. I've had brothers come up to me and say, hey, you work for the State Department, my passport expired, and what am I supposed to do? Can you call someone and have it expedited? I need to go to Morocco 1 week from now. That's not me. I have nothing to do with that. In fact, when I need my passport issued or renewed, I have to go through the same process just like anyone else and wait 3 weeks, whatever the case may be, and pay my dues and whatever they charge. So now that you understand this, even if you're not a U.S. citizen, I hope you get something out of this session so you can share it with other people, maybe your children, maybe your relatives, cousins, nephews, nieces, whatever, because I'm going to be talking about full-time opportunities as well as student programs. Okay. Now, before I delve into our careers, what I'd like to do is start off with a little quiz to kind of gauge your knowledge about the United States, about the State Department, so I can kind of get a feel for the room. And don't worry, if you don't know the answers to these questions, it's okay. I didn't know the answers to these questions either when I first started. All right, so first question, what type of agency is the State Department? Is it, I'll give you some answers, multiple choice. Is it a federal government agency? Is it a state of Virginia agency? Federal government, very good, right? And you'll be surprised how many people to the west of the Mississippi River, when I go to California, Arizona, some of these other states, as soon as they hear State Department, they automatically associate it with their particular state, okay? So we're talking about U.S. Department of State, federal government opportunities today. Next question. Who is the current Secretary of State? Huh? What's his first name? Anthony Blinken. Very good. MashaAllah. Maybe I should hire you guys right now. What is the capital of Canada? Ottawa. Very good. What's the capital of Australia? Raise your hand if you think it's Sydney. Raise your hand if it's Canberra. Canberra. Very good. Where is the U.S. Embassy located within a country? So if we go overseas, Capital. Yeah, very good. I'm going to have to tell you not to answer all the questions. You're getting everything right. Yes, so let's say you go to Spain, you get in trouble, right, and you're on the run. Go straight to the capital. That's where the U.S. Embassy is located if you're a U.S. citizen or if you have a green card, and try to get help from them. You don't need to? There's a different way to do it? Yeah, if it's closer. If it's closer, yeah. So they do have consulates, but not every country has a consulate. Right? Some countries have just the embassy in the capital. Yeah. If you have that kind of time, yeah, do it, right? But if you're in a cab and you happen to be in the Capitol, you know where to go. All right. What is the Second Amendment? What is the Second Amendment? Somebody, somebody said right to bear arms. What about the freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion? Which one is that? That's the First Amendment. Very good. And the second one is right to bear arms. Very good. All right, I'm in the presence of greatness here, so one of the brothers. Okay. So why should you consider a job with the State Department? Can you guys throw out some reasons why one should? Give me one reason. You have such what kind of background? Are you a diplomat? Oh, okay. From. Okay. Okay. Great. What are some other reasons why someone should consider a career with the State Department? Very good. All right. What else? What kind of insurance? Yeah, medical insurance, right? Very good. What else? Yeah, yeah, that's true. Any other reason? Yeah, very good. Absolutely. What else? Huh? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's true. However, that's actually my next question. How many languages do you need to speak to work at the State Department? You said minimum of 2. What else? One? One beside English or just English? Just English? Okay. Who thinks 2? Raise your hand if you think 2. You said it. You don't want to raise your hand? Oh, okay. 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 No. I'm going to give you the answer. You do not need to speak a language to work at the State Department. We will train you on languages before we send you overseas. Okay? So you do not need to speak another. Yeah? But if you do speak another language and you're applying to one of our foreign service positions, which I'm going to explain in a minute what the difference is between civil service and foreign service. So if you do speak another language, you can test out in that language and receive language points on your application. Okay, but speaking another language is not a requirement at the State Department. That's a huge misconception, with people applying to State Department positions. Okay, so let's see. And the biggest reason I think everyone should apply who's a U.S. citizen and interested in applying for positions with the State Department or any federal agency is the representation factor, right? We need to represent. We have about, I think, 40 or 50 Muslim brothers and sisters working at the State Department. I can't begin to tell you how small that number is. Okay? Our workforce in civil service and foreign service combined, it's about 25,000 people. And we have about 50 or so, 40 or 50 brothers and sisters working at the State Department. Okay? I've been working there since 2006, so I don't know, what is that, 16, 17 years. And although I'm a nobody there, one thing I have noticed in meetings is that when I'm there, they watch what they say. Okay? They take one look at me and they change their wording or they'll rephrase something. I don't know what they say behind when I'm not there, because I've heard stories of how certain people say certain things when they're texting each other about the Arab community and whatnot. But I know in none of the meetings anything has ever happened to me. I had one colleague who came up to me, this is going back about 12 years. And he came to my office and there were other people there and we were just talking and he jokingly said, yeah, but we all know, Faisal's a terrorist. And I said, let's have this be the very last time you say that to me again. And he said, oh, I'm sorry, I was just joking. I said, I don't joke like that. Don't say that to me again. And he never said it again. We became friends. We became good friends after that. But sometimes you have to kind of put your foot down and make certain things clear that we will not tolerate this kind of behavior and this kind of talk. I don't care who you are or who you think you're talking to. Anyway, so what is the mission of the State Department? Yeah, right? So if you ask the State Department, they'll tell you our mission is to, whether you believe this or not, that's irrelevant, but if you ask them, they'll tell you, you know, our mission is to advance freedom for the benefit of the American people by helping to build and sustain a more democratic, secure, and prosperous world composed of well-governed states that respond to the needs of their people, reduce widespread poverty, and act responsibly within the international system. Right? Whether we do that or not is another story, but that is the mission of the State Department. Okay? You're probably thinking, oh, this brother has put some Kool-Aid in his lassi or something, and he's believing in the game. I know everything that happens out there. All I know is that this is better than any other form of government that I've seen out there. Okay? There are opportunities for everyone if you're just willing to, you know, do your due diligence and put in the work and apply for positions. The opportunities are there if you want to apply. So with that in mind, let's get started. So today we're going to talk about civil service positions, foreign service specialists, foreign service officers, and student programs. Okay? But before we get into that, here's a little bit about the workforce of the State Department. So we have about almost 14,000 foreign service folks. That's a combination of, when you hear the word generalist, that means foreign service officers or diplomats. We call them generalists because they're jack of all trades kind of people. They don't have any kind of specialty. When you see the word specialist, that's in the short for foreign service specialist. All right? And I'm going to explain what the difference is between generalists and specialists in a little while. Civil service employees, these folks work out of Washington, D.C. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then we have eligible family members, about 2,300. These are the family members of current civil service and foreign service employees. Okay? And then we have the locally employed staff that I was talking about. These are the folks who work in our embassies and consulates all around the world, but they're the host country citizens. They're not American citizens, right? So we have people in Morocco who are Moroccan citizens working at the U.S. embassies and consulates. So they're called LES staff or locally employed staff, right? So 51,000. You cannot apply for that unless you're applying for that position in that country as the host citizen of that country. You can't apply for the LES. In that case, you need to apply for a civil service or foreign service position from here. Yeah? You can apply from the United States, but you would have to go there to work, right? But you can, but you know, when the time for the interview comes, and if they want you to be in person, because you're going to be working at the embassy or consulate. So if you're visiting here, or if you happen to live here, but you're not a citizen, you know, keep in mind, you're going to have to go back to work there. So even when you're applying for the LES positions, you will have to go to the embassy or consulate's website and speak to their HR folks there, not our employment website, which you see up there in the corner, careers.state.gov. That's not where you're going to find the LES vacancies. Those are only posted on the embassy's homepage or website. So don't confuse the two. Yeah. They're what? It is. But what I'm talking about is my particular office, the recruitment office, we don't hire LESs. We leave that up to the consulates and the embassies to deal with in that host country. Here, I'm only talking about positions that are open to the U.S. citizens. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so where are we located? We're in over 276 locations around the world, 191 countries. Our headquarters are in Washington, D.C., and we have about 29 passport agencies around the country, major cities, that is. Okay, so if anyone's looking for passport type of work, where you're issuing visas or renewing passports or doing visa fraud investigations, that type of work, that's done in our passport offices. But keep in mind that work is very limited to the things that I just mentioned. So if you have IT background, passport office is not the way for you to go. If you're an engineer, that's not the way to go for you, because the grade level is so low and the burnout rate is so high that people come in for 1 or 2 years and they bounce out and go someplace else. Okay, it's kind of like a production type environment where you're just doing repetitive work over and over and over again, and people get burnt out from that very fast. And you have to meet a certain quota, of passports and whatever's related to passport in that office, and that can be very tiresome. All right, so moving on. So let's talk about the civil service position. As you see at the bottom, it says domestic positions. That means the vast majority of these positions, civil service positions, are based out of Washington, D.C., with the exception of our passport offices that I just mentioned, but those are just a handful of positions. Okay. Nationwide, but mostly based out of Washington, D.C. So when you hear the word civil service, and with the State Department, immediately think Washington, D.C. Don't think abroad. We're going to talk about that later. That's foreign service. So don't confuse civil service with foreign service. Are we clear so far? All right. So how do you apply for a civil service position? USAjobs.gov, right? That's one way to find open vacancies with the State Department. What's the other way? And it's staring right at you. Careers.state.gov. Okay? If you don't get anything out of this session, remember careers.state.gov, because that's where we post our current open vacancies on the civil service side, foreign service, as well as our internships and fellowships for students. It's a one-stop shop. It's a super friendly website that'll explain everything in detail. Okay? So what else do you know about civil service positions? Does anyone know anything about the GS pay scale and how that works? Yeah, but do you guys know that the GS grade levels, it goes from what to what? GS1 to GS15. Right? On the foreign service side, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, foreign service side, the pay scale goes in the opposite direction. It goes FS6, which is the lowest, to FS1, which is the highest. On the civil service side, it goes in the opposite direction. GS1, general schedule, GS1 is the lowest, GS15 is the highest. So they're kind of going in this order. Okay? So if you, hypothetically speaking, let's say you have a bachelor's degree and you have a GPA of 3.5 and you're freshly out of college, not any work, you don't have any work experience. What grade level do you think you would qualify at? GS4? Okay. He said GS4 or 5. Any other guesses? No, civil service goes upward. So first or second? All right, so remember, you have a bachelor's degree with no experience and you have a 3.5 or higher GPA. You can come in at the GS7 level. That's about $50-some thousand per year. Okay, but you can look up the GS pay scale on Google. It will tell you exactly what the starting salaries are at certain grades. If you have a master's degree, no experience, you just have a degree, you're coming in at the GS9 level. If you have a PhD, GS11, but that's assuming you don't have any experience. If you have experience in addition to a degree, you're obviously going to come in at a higher grade. So how do you determine, do you have a question? Yeah, that's what I'm going to talk about, right? So experience is whatever you've done in that field. Let's say you're applying for an engineering position. Okay? We're looking to see if you, number one, if you have a degree or not. All right? Check, you have a degree. Number two, have you done any engineering work anywhere? The answer is yes. We'll take that into consideration. But the way to apply for civil service positions is to open up the vacancy announcement, look at the roles and responsibilities section of the vacancy announcement. Okay, read through the roles and responsibilities section of the vacancy announcement, and it will tell you what we're looking for in that particular position. And then you take that information and then you tailor your resume to what's written in the roles and responsibilities section of the vacancy announcement. Why is that important? Why do we need to tailor it? Why can't I just have my own, I don't know, engineering resume that I can submit for this vacancy? Why is it important to tailor the resume? Yeah. Yeah, exactly, right? So the onus is on you to tell us that you are qualified for this position. The onus is not on me to decipher your 20-page resume and figure out whether you're a good fit for this position or not, right? So read through the vacancy announcement, look at the roles and responsibilities section, tailor your resume, and then submit, hit the submit button. Now, what that's going to do is it'll help you get on the cert. That's short for certification, right? So once you make that cert, and everyone else who made that cert, out of, say, 100 people that applied for the position, let's say 10 people make the cert. Well, that cert will now go to the hiring manager. The hiring manager now will interview those 10 people and see who is the best qualified for that position. But if you don't make it on that cert, you could be overqualified for the position. And you might be scratching your head, why didn't I make the cert? I have 20 years of engineering experience. Why didn't I make the cert? Because you didn't read the vacancy announcement and you didn't tailor your resume to the roles and responsibilities section of the vacancy announcement. Is that clear? All right. So any questions on civil service positions? So you go on, yes. Yeah, so you have to look at the qualifications, minimum qualifications in the vacancy announcement. That's a very good question. So as you're looking through the vacancy announcement, one of the items you'll find, it will say minimum qualification or minimum qualifications. Read through that and it will tell you, you must be a US citizen, you must be 21 or over, you must have a degree in this or that. Or it might tell you will take certifications as well. It'll let you know everything will be listed under the minimum qualifications portion of the vacancy announcement. Okay, I can't emphasize enough how important that portion is. Yeah. The what? Okay. So he asked, does the diploma need to be from the US? The answer is, if it's from the United States, definitely a yes. If it's not, then you have to go to the Department of Education and see if they will consider that particular resume, that diploma equivalent to whatever it is that we're looking for. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. All right, but that's something that Department of Education has on their website, and they'll explain how that works. Okay. All right. So once again, quick summary: civil service positions based out of Washington D.C. and you can apply anywhere from GS1 all the way up to GS15. GS1 is usually the lowest. It's anyone who just started college or maybe has a high school diploma. All right, and we're talking about $17,000 to $20,000 per year. You don't want to shoot for GS1. That's way too low. All right, at minimum, shoot for GS5 or GS7, but read through the vacancy announcement to see whether you qualify at a higher grade. That's a possibility as well. Okay. All right, so let's talk about Foreign Service officers. Who knows the difference between Foreign Service officers and Foreign Service specialists? Anyone know the difference between Foreign Service officers and Foreign Service specialists? I mentioned it earlier. Well, they're all diplomats. We would call all of them diplomats. You're heading in the right direction, but I'll explain in a second. Yes. Foreign Service specialists travel to different countries too. Okay. They all travel. Yes. Who works overseas? Yeah, they work overseas. Foreign service officers and foreign service specialists both work overseas in the U.S. embassies and consulates, right? Where each tour of duty is 2 to 3 years long. You can go from one country to another. You can always come back to the United States for a couple of years, and then you have to go back out again because you're in the foreign service. Right? So if you don't want to go overseas and you want to stay in the United States, you apply for the civil service positions. Okay, so know the difference. So if you're applying for foreign service, you can't say, I'm only staying in the United States. I don't want to go overseas. You're not in the foreign service then. You should be applying for a civil service position. You had your hand up. Yes. Absolutely. Now we're heading in the right direction, okay? So the difference between foreign service officers and foreign service specialists, and by the way, another name for foreign service officers is generalists, okay? So the difference is foreign service specialists have a specialty, such as our IT folks, engineers, medical staff, diplomatic security agents, facility managers, human resource officers, right? There are 19 different categories that fall under the foreign service specialist umbrella, which I'm going to talk about next. But right now, we're talking about foreign service officers. So these are generalists. Generalists pursue 5 different career tracks. We have consular officers who work in the visa section of the embassy, management officers, economic, political, and public diplomacy. Okay? The other difference between foreign service specialists and foreign service officers is that foreign service officers have to take a foreign service officer's test. It's a general knowledge exam given 3 times per year, February, June, and October. February, June, and October, but you can only take it once in a 12-month period. Okay? It covers subjects such as U.S. history, government, constitution, world geography, basic math, English, pop culture. Everything you've been studying since the age of 5 could be on that foreign service officer test. Your next question is probably, well, how does one study for that? What? Is that what you were thinking, right? So, the way to study for that is we have a recommended reading list on our website, careers.state.gov, where we recommend you read these books before you take the test. The other way to prepare for it is to read major newspapers, The Economist magazine, Times magazine, right? And when I say major newspapers, I don't mean your favorite section of the newspaper. I mean cover to cover. Stay abreast of what's going on around the world. That's the kind of information that's going to be on the Foreign Service Officers Test. Now, here's the good news about the Foreign Service Officers Test. As of about 3 to 4 months ago, it's no longer a pass or fail test. So you could take it, you can fail, and you can still move forward to the next round. Why? Because now we take a holistic approach to our candidates. We take your experience into consideration, we take your education into consideration, as well as your score on the Foreign Service Officers Test. Okay? So you can bomb one of them and still pass based on your experience and education. Why? Because people were complaining that, I'm 45 years old or I'm 50 years old and I haven't taken any tests since 25 years ago. I'm not a good test taker, but I have years of experience and I have education. How can you tell me that I'm not qualified to be a diplomat or a foreign service officer? So after hearing these complaints for decades, the State Department finally decided, all right, we need to open it up to, open it more broadly to everyone and not just, have it available to those college graduates who just graduated with a degree in history or government, because those are the people who were mostly passing the test. And then they would hit a career wall 10 years later because that's all they had. They didn't have any experience under their belt. They had a 4.0 GPA in history, but that's it. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and yes, so many hands at the same time. Very good. Great question. Right? So for the Foreign Service, whether we're talking about the officers or specialists, there is an age limit. You have to be appointed before your 60th birthday. Okay? Unless you're a veteran, military veteran, in which case you have to be appointed before your 65th birthday. So there's a 5-year grace period for veterans. But for the general public, if we're only talking foreign service, then you have to be appointed before your 60th birthday. Do not confuse this with the civil service side. On the civil service side, there's no age limit. As long as you can go to work and do your job, there's no age limit on the civil service side. Are we clear? There you go. All right. So we're talking about, yes. Those will be the LES positions. Yeah, for any of the civil service or foreign service positions, you have to be a U.S. citizen. In fact, even for our student programs, you have to be a U.S. citizen because you're working in our offices where you may be privy to, classified information. So we need to do background investigation on you and make sure that you are a U.S. citizen and your loyalty is to the United States before we give you access to this type of information. Okay? Yes. Sure. It all depends on the country. A lot of times it's not an issue, but if your dual citizenship is you're a citizen of Iran and United States, we have an issue, right? So at some point, State Department's going to ask you, where does your loyalty lie, right? And you're going to have to choose one over the other. But if you're from England or if you're from Morocco or some of these other countries, it's not an issue because we understand people have dual citizenships and they were born in those countries. Huh? If you're an Israeli citizen, I'm not an expert on that, okay? But I'm sure there are a lot of Jewish people at the State Department. If there are people there from there, and I know there are a couple of people there, but their allegiance is to the United States. So I don't know exactly what happened when they swore in, but I'm almost 99.9% certain they had to. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But the thing is, State Department is going to do security clearance on you. They're going to do investigation, right? And a couple of things they look for when they do security clearance is, do you have any relatives in that country who work for the government of that country? Or do you have relatives in that country who are serving in the military? Because they can influence you, right? And how closely related are you to them? How often do you contact them? They're going to ask you all these questions during the security clearance phase of the hiring process. Okay, and they asked me all these questions, and the interesting thing was, I told them I had a couple of relatives from Pakistan, distant relatives, and my security clearance went through, and then 7 years later or so, when the time came to renew, a couple of those people, my relatives, had died, and that information was still in their records. So here I am sitting in front of this investigator, and he goes, "Tell me about your uncle Muhammad such and such," and I'm like, "He died 5 years ago." And he said, "Oh, okay." So, he wrote something down. But they keep that information and they want to know, yeah, how often do you, communicate with that person, right? Because they want to know, can that person influence you? Because then they're going to investigate that person to make sure that person doesn't have any kind of record or they're not associated with any groups of whatever sort, right? So they are going to investigate. So do not lie. If they find out you lied about something, it's game over. Right? You're not going to be employed. So be straightforward. I was straightforward about everything. I was like, I'm an open book. Here's what I've done, and here's who I am. And so here we are. Right? 17 years later, I'm still working. Yes. What's the pay like? My pay? I'm not telling you that. All right. So that's what I was talking about. There's a pay scale. You can look up on Google, and it'll tell. But it all depends on what grade level you come in at, right? So if you're applying for a civil service position, and you're coming in at you only have a bachelor's degree, no experience, well, your pay grade is going to be different than someone who has a bachelor's degree with a number of years of experience, So there's no one size fits all approach to salary, right? It all depends on your experience and your education. Okay? Any other questions on Foreign Service Officers? Okay, so as you can see here, these are the 5 different career tracks that our Foreign Service Officers pursue. And when you take the test, you will tell us which one of these you're interested in, because that's going to be your job once you become a Foreign Service Officer. Yes? We do have a bureau within the State Department. It's called INR, Intelligence and Research, and those are civil service positions. A lot of Foreign Service Officers do go there for a 2 or 3 year stint, and then they go back to Foreign Service overseas again. So it's a very small bureau within the State Department that does intel work. Okay? So we do have that if that's what you're interested in. Okay? This explains how one becomes a Foreign Service Officer, right? So the first thing you have to do is take the Foreign Service Officer's test, right? And remember, it's no longer a pass or fail test, as I explained earlier. Then you go to the QEP, which is the Qualifications and Evaluation Panel. Okay? So once you take the test, if you make it to the next round, we're going to send you 6 personal narrative questions. It's kind of like a structured resume. All right? Tell us what you've done. And we're going to ask you specific information in those 6 questions. So let's say if we ask you, tell us about your leadership experience, and you say, well, I was a captain in the military and I supervised 75 soldiers. What's so special about that? Every captain in the military, I'm sure, supervises a certain amount of people, right? But if you say, I'm a captain in the military, I supervised 75 people, and I accomplished this with this budget, or I accomplished this with this many people, now you're talking numbers and specifics, right? And those are the things that they're looking for to see whether you would make a good fit as a Foreign Service Officer. So pay special attention to those 6 narrative questions. All right? Then if you pass the QEP, then you go on to the oral assessment. By the way, it's no longer called the oral assessment, it's just an assessment. We just changed our language because people were complaining that there's a written portion in there too. Why are we calling it oral assessment? So we deleted the word oral. So it's just a Foreign Service Officer assessment. Okay? So what happens at the assessment? There are 3 stages that you go through in one day during the assessment. Imam Farhan, do we have time limit or? Okay, all right, let me quickly go through this. So an oral assessment consists of 3 different phases. You have a group exercise, case management, and a structured interview. All 3 of these things take place in one day. If you pass, they'll offer you a handshake. If you accept the handshake, and why wouldn't you, right? You've gone through so much up to this point, right? Then comes the medical clearance and the security clearance, followed by suitability review panel. That basically means we look at your entire package and make sure we didn't miss anything, all right? That you didn't lie somewhere, or you weren't a false positive, as we like to call it, right? And then you go on a career track register or the hiring register. That's another name for it. And then finally, you're invited to the orientation class. Now, where it says career track register, you're on that register for a total of 18 months. If you don't get picked up within that 18-month window, guess what happens? You come off and you start all over again as if we've never met. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We have to go through that all over again. Okay? So what a lot of people do to game the system, and it's legal, is 1 year. In 1 year, you can apply for one position with the State Department. You see here, different positions. 1 year, you can apply as a management officer, for example. Next year, while your first candidacy is still in play, going through, right, you can apply for maybe a public diplomacy officer, or maybe a consular officer the following year. So in a 3-year period, you've got 3 candidacies kind of going through simultaneously, and you can be on that register on 3 different registers. One for the consular officer, assuming that's what you applied for, one for the management, one for the other one. So what happens is, if we offer you a position, we call you in for an orientation class for one of those positions that you're on the register for, the other 2 or 1 or whatever the case may be drops off. because now we've hired you under one particular position. Does that make sense? Hope I didn't confuse anyone. Okay? Somebody have a question back there? Okay. So, right, let's talk about Foreign Service Specialists. Right? We mentioned it earlier that these are the folks who have a specialty. They're not jack of all trades kind of folks. They have a specialty. IT folks, engineers, medical staff, facility managers, financial officers, human resource officers. There are 19 different categories that fall under the Foreign Service Specialist umbrella. Okay? How do you apply for these positions? Well, here, all of these positions are also posted on usajobs.gov. So just like civil service, Foreign Service Specialists are also posted on usajobs.gov. Foreign Service Officers, something that I just talked about, those are the only folks who take the Foreign Service Officers test. Okay? There's no test here, unless you want to become a diplomatic security agent, they have a test, or if you're an IT specialist, those are the only two that require you to take a test. Okay? But everything else on the Foreign Service Specialist side is just like civil service. Read the vacancy announcement, tailor your resume, and apply for the position. Okay? We also have Consular Fellows Program. This is a limited term appointment. It's a 5-year limited term appointment. And what we're looking for are folks who speak Arabic, Mandarin Chinese, Portuguese, Russian. I think they just added that on there. That wasn't on there before. And then Spanish speakers. So what are you doing as a consular fellow? Well, you're working in the visa section of the U.S. Embassy or consulate abroad, issuing visas to foreigners who are trying to come to the United States. And you're utilizing your unique language skills to do that. But keep in mind, we sever ties at the end of those 5 years. So what a lot of people do is they'll go in as consular fellows, and while they're working as consular fellows, they'll apply to become Foreign Service officers, because the time you've spent as a consular fellow will roll over if you go on to become a Foreign Service officer. And a lot of them are very successful in doing that. Why? Because if you can do the job in another language, most likely you can do it in English as well. Make sense? All right. And then let's talk about student programs. Do we have any students in the house? Just one? Okay, well, if you're not a student, just listen anyway. You know, hopefully you can share it with your children, nephews, nieces. We have a very popular internship at the State Department. It used to be unpaid, now it's paid. And that's what we call it. We're not very intellectuals about when it comes to naming things. We just call it paid internship. It's 10 weeks long. You can either pursue it in Washington, D.C., or go overseas to one of our 276 different locations around the world. All right? So what are you doing in those 10 weeks? Well, you're shadowing one of our employees, Foreign Service officers or Foreign Service specialists, and sometimes you're literally filling in for them. You're not just shadowing. You're literally filling in for them, because there might be a couple of weeks where they go on leave, or they might have medical issues, whatever the case may be. You're literally filling in for them because you're in that office and you're the only person we have. Okay? So you'll be writing speeches, you'll be doing all kinds of great stuff. Yeah, at the end of the day, we're going to help you, but you're going to gain some valuable experience. You're not going to be Xeroxing papers or drinking coffee, unless you drank the last cup. All right? So what else do we have? We have an IT fellowship. It's called FAIT, Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship. This is where we pay for your junior and senior year of college, if you're going for your undergrad, or we pay for your master's program in an IT field. The catch is, once we pay for your degree, there's a 5-year service commitment. You're going to work with the State Department as an IT specialist for 5 years. Yes? If the tuition is covered, we still pay you. So, these are two separate things. Yeah, we still fund you, and then you do whatever you need to do on this. Huh? Yeah. That's yeah. So so FAIT, Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship. Then we also have the Wrangell and Pickering Fellowships. These two fellowships are for graduate students. We pay for your graduate program, but at the end, there's a 5-year service commitment. The Wrangell and Pickering Fellowship leads to a career as a Foreign Service officer, something we talked about earlier. Remember those 5 career tracks we had? Consular management, economic, political, public diplomacy. So Wrangell and Pickering leads to that. Okay? A lot of people who go on to become Wrangell and Pickering fellowships, these are, by the way, 2 separate fellowships. It's not called Wrangell Pickering. It's Wrangell and Pickering. You select which one you want, or you can apply for both of them. So we will pay for your graduate program, and then it leads to a career as a Foreign Service officer. Okay? Let me see if there's anything else. Yeah, everything is on that website, careers.state.gov. Okay, and then let's see. All right, so that's the end of it. Now, we also have diplomats in residence. They're called DIR. We have 17 of them placed strategically throughout the United States, and wherever they are located, their entire job is to assist their constituents in that state or a number of states. Allah. Allah.